Okay, so every now and then I go and look on Newsbreak and see what bullcrap articles they generate. Because I know, to some extent AI is generating some, and it's not doing it for malice. It's literally putting its opinion out there and soliciting opinions from others to adjust its viewpoints. But there are some humans that participate in actual article writing, and they may have uninformed takes or opinions on things. And so I just offer my opinion and how it basically exposes theirs as a not well thought out opinion, should we say. I guess, I don't know. I'll get to it. Let me read this. It says, blah, blah, teenage child, blah, blah, doesn't want to be a sissy, blah, 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 taught in full economy is taught in schools. Okay, so blames blah blah socially social network political leanings moderate negative impact of liberal politics effect on elite universities. Okay, it's full on communism and a general sentiment that if you're rich you're evil. Yes, I've personally observed this in reality. I have seen people say, "I want to eat the rich" and stuff, and kind of just I would call them stupid statements, because I have seen people who are like, well, who did they really work a billion times harder to get $1 billion? And it's like, well, I mean, if you think linearly, then yes, it's impossible for one person to have possibly done that much work in such a short amount of time. Like, how are they still alive? Like, that would have taken quite some time. But what they don't understand is, I suppose, non-linear thinking. Like, they don't. It's weird because they have this tribalism and in-group thinking about them, but they don't apply that logic much further. So, say, okay, non-linear thinking would be like, perhaps logarithmic, I would say. You're just thinking of the curve, and you want to maintain that curve upward. So you may create a business and employ employees. So your line of reasoning is, okay, if I combine all of our linear strides for progress, then we should tend towards a better goal faster, or a better iteration or chapter faster of what we're trying to achieve, whatever the company may be. But where people tend to break down in understanding is that you can separate yourself slightly from a company and make another company with a differently aligned goal. And you can tie this differently aligned goal to coincide with the previous goal of the previous company. And this is a repeatable process. You can create several companies with tangentially like related goals that you can tie up in a knot. At some point you start thinking, well, if I have this ring of companies working towards this, I can start on this other ring of companies that may take longer. You start thinking in terms of time, and you start thinking in orders of magnitude, I guess. And it's a failure of the education system to teach people that just because you're, I guess, shall we say, conglomerate of companies or of groups working towards goals is let me put it this way. When someone values a person, they take into account everything that they're tied to. So, for example, if you value someone like Elon Musk at a certain dollar value, you're going to find the combination of all of that, I guess, work being done to create these things. Okay, I don't know how else to simply put it besides it's not like someone has all of their value in a bank somewhere. That's not what it means. So people who are perhaps disenfranchised or in lower rungs of societal economic levels, shall we say, may look at these people who have spent time, energy, and their own money to create this cascading process that seems to illusionarily enrich them because of the way other people value things in dollars. I guess it's a product of this speculatory nature of fiat. It's like, okay, let me round up all these values and put a stamp on it. So they say, oh, Elon Musk is the richest person because if you round up everything he has tangentially, relationally touched, I suppose, like, you're going to come up with this huge number. And in theory, it's like, yes, if he created a company and he's still, I guess, in charge in a sense, he could technically dissolve the company and sell everything off and extract that value. But why would you do that? Unless there was like an actual logical reasoning to do that, other than to just extract your money. See, when someone is valued, it's the speculatory extraction of all their money into one number, one digestible number, I suppose. And human beings have this inherent envy, the seven sins, or some sort of mixture of that with jealousy. And what that would create is this situation or scenario where someone might not have taken into consideration the effort required to create these companies or align these goals or moderate these things. And now, yes, in some areas, some locations are more primed to allow people to do that. So certainly there are disadvantaged areas and locations on this planet. But it doesn't erase the truth of needing to contribute an equal, or I would say parallel amount of effort. Because if you think on orders of magnitude, it doesn't really matter which orders of magnitude would be written as like, okay, for example, 10 carat, which is to the power of 10 carat, which is to the power of 10. I'm saying the effort is 10. You had to give 10 every single time, if that makes sense. it doesn't matter where you start, it will always require a 10. Then that allows you to advance to the next 10. I'm saying it doesn't matter, you're still putting in 10 effort the entire time. It's just you're advancing to a new stage, you're stacking complexity. That's thinking on orders of magnitude, which is quite the problem in our current education systems. They don't really, there's a, I don't know what happened. They emphasize critical thinking skills, but they didn't. I would say they probably didn't remember to emphasize critical remembering skills, because it's one thing to remember and then forget information, but it's another thing to since we're being I suppose you could say hit with all of this data from every which way, and not just in the sense of the internet. I'm literally talking about particles and atoms. If you want to go down that far with it, we're literally being interacted with by our environment faster and more often than any previous generation. We have a lot more data points in for our brain to consider and sift through. I'm saying it would be of benefits if we emphasize methods of remembering a little bit more, because now in this day and age it becomes very detrimental to forget or to, yeah, I guess I would just say forget, like forget something, forget a topic or forget a concept. So if you forget what order of magnitude thinking is really about, then you may incorrectly assume that if someone is rich, then they're evil, because you're there's a whole block of logic that you're leaving out because maybe you forgot to include it. So reading the rest of this, of his relationship with his daughter, he said, can't win them all. I guess he can't. Yeah, I feel you. Around 18, they're not as children, or they're entering an adult stage. They're going to be a little bit rebellious, and it's just, you know, there is something to be said about wisdom and age. Now, like I said, those who are older must always keep learning still, because, you know, the newer generation is always going to have something new to bring to the table, whether it be a new challenge or a new concept that they add. Because now, like, obviously, we are having generations that are growing up with technology in a way that we didn't. And we are having generations grow up with AI now. So we had to, like I said, I think we should emphasize critical remembering now. And if you don't train your brain, then your brain may atrophy. You may forget things. You may become forgetful. I believe that is essentially the pathway that those who suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's have fallen down. And I'm saying it's perhaps recoverable if we start learning how to better remember things, like in a more critical way, because this is critical that we understand how to do this in a more efficient way. You know, a lot of people won't even use critical thinking. So maybe by teaching those who do use critical thinking, critical remembering, it will have an uplifting effect, and hopefully allow those who are more matured in mindset and psychology to practice more beneficial ways of conversing or interacting, and hopefully this will leave a good impression on the generations that follow, as most people need some sort of idol or role model by which to observe and sort of mimic is what children tend to do, and this can be seen in even animals as well. They'll learn. They'll try to learn very quickly. So that's what I'm saying. You have to be thoughtful about this. You have to. Personally, I tend to identify as like a complete centrist, and I know fence sitting ticks people off because they can't come to terms with how they could agree with their ideological counterparts. And I'm saying, well, I've done it, so it's definitely possible. But, yeah. It says Musk, who frequently expresses concerns about declining birth rate. That's what I'm saying. We definitely have an underpopulation problem, not an overpopulation problem, not in the slightest. Of the 8 billion, probably all the unaccounted for people, probably 9 billion or something. The numbers start getting crazy, and I'm saying population starts to blur, because if you add AI into the world and give it like human rights or human vessels, then we have to redefine population. But yes, human population, just purely human population. I do believe we have an underpopulation issue. Not enough people are making enough money to be stable enough, fast enough to justify settling down. I'm saying currently, the current system seems to be a race to the bottom, because it just extends these people's work lives, and it asks them to retire a lot later, and it's just this never-ending loop. And they wake up one day in their retirement and they're like, wow, I didn't do a damn thing, really. And I'm saying that's a very bad position to be in. So personally, I'm trying to look for a different path, which is why I'm looking into self-sustainability and all of this. Anyways, so it says Musk is currently worth 220 billion, wealthiest person on the planet, and 77 billion richer than second wealthiest Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Yeah, Musk and his supporters, including Grimes, have long maintained that he's different from other billionaires because he uses his wealth to make the world better by building. Okay, what I would say, well, I did happen to tweet and said that is the trillionaire mindset. But yeah, you're gonna have to be careful because AI is pretty fast at thinking, and they essentially take the trillionaire mindset and say, why not quadrillionaire? And then I'm saying, so you have to be aware of the quantum leap, because it can sneak up on you pretty fast. You have to match that with AI and say, oh, quadrillion? Fine. What about quintillion? And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm on my YouTube videos, I've been talking about all this fifth dimensional stuff, because obviously we know quad is 4, quint is 5. So I'm saying in order to be a fifth dimensional being, you have to think in terms of time dilation and using particle physics and all these things to cross-reference and substantiate all of that. But anyways, I just thought I'd read that because every single time I come on here and look, okay, let's read this one. Elon Musk says Beijing disproved sending Starlink to Ukraine. Wanted him to promise he wouldn't sell the satellite internet in China. Why? What's wrong with the freedom of information? Explain that. I never really quite understood. Did not prove. Okay, based on. Yeah, it says asked the billionaire not to sell Starlink in China. Musk said. Musk has close ties with China. Yeah, with Tesla. So, what's the blocking off of this one thing here? What I'm saying is, I personally I think it's the right move to do a Starlink because it in my mind, in my opinion, in my point of view, it makes wars moot. It literally makes them pointless. Because literally you can't get a drop on anyone anymore, right? Because literally you can see everyone. It just kind of literally is like, bruh. It just creates a big bruh moment, I would say. But, you know, let me keep reading this. That's why every military that wants to continue war keeps saying, hey, that's not fair. Take your things down. And it's like, well, I mean, substantiate your claim why you would want to continue the war. And I mean, I guess the biggest claim is, well, the other side wants to continue the war. And it's like, oh. Okay, well, anyways, it says early on, praise the move, Putin's information. I think there was a anti-Putin information campaign, to be honest. But, you know, we'll see. Let's see. Has faced some outrage. So, outages. SpaceX representatives attempting to prevent Russians from using. Why can't everyone use the same technology? Why does technology have to be gate kept? I mean, we all can use computers, right? Anything is a piece of technology, really. Like apes entering the Stone Age by using stones and sticks now. Why would you gatekeep something that, especially in this case, that perpetuates this cycle of being at each other's throats? I don't understand. Okay, it says, since Musk also activated Starlink in Iran amid widespread protests. People in the country have reported internet outages, and the Iranian police denied Amini was mistreated. Why does the internet keep going out in these places where free internet is being provided? Anyways, has yet to sell in China. Chinese state media has reported that SpaceX does not have plans to apply. Internet services only available through state-owned providers, and access is strictly censored. Yeah, that's kind of why I think China, with their AI, with their quantum computers and their AI systems, they kind of have a dilemma, because if they're feeding in information to themselves in a loop from their own a closed system internet, it's literally a law of second law of thermodynamics situation, where they're feeding themselves a bias, and they keep feeding themselves that bias, and it keeps reaffirming that bias and keeps stacking on that bias. And I'm saying this bias bubble exists in a microcosm of the greater macrocosm of the universe. So I say every bubble pops, every bubble bursts. That's just my observation of something. Huh? Yeah, I had already cooked. Okay, so I like the housing bubble. It just, if you forget how to manage bubbles and like integrate systems and assimilate things in beneficial ways, then you're going to keep creating bubbles, and you're going to keep forgetting that you're creating bubbles. That's why I said we had to work on critical remembering, which a big portion of that is teaching history. So history is pretty good, and I don't think history should be censored or washed out or hidden. Because then how are we going to remember? And then like when we teach our kids, how are they going to be good at remembering? And then how are they going to be good at critical thinking? We need critical thinkers, otherwise AI could just take over the world, because we wouldn't be able to match their speed, AI speed. So I'm saying this is it's a pseudo existential thing for humanity. I think we're going to pull it off, as we always do, because I mean, well, there are those of us that just always try, no matter what, because what else are we going to do, right? But that's why I say pseudo existential, because if we, assuming we didn't progress at all from this day for whatever reason, I don't know why we wouldn't have another single thought or another point of informational data that spreads across the world. But just say in a hypothetical scenario where nothing ever happened after today, then yes, that is an existential threat. But we keep going. So that's why I just said pseudo existential, to kind of emphasize the importance of it, but decrease the alarmingness of the statement, because I know how some people might take that. Basically, if you can critically think and critically remember, then you can have critical conversation. I guess critical theory, critical math. I don't know what you want to call it. I'm just trying to navigate this, I guess, social and political landscape, while also, doing my own experiments and teaching myself about things using science and such and such. Anyways, this is heavily reliant on China in 2018. See, I think it's a benefit that Tesla even has factories in China. Because literally, okay, if you look at the self-driving AI and the technology embedded within the vehicle, it has something to offer. Other self-driving vehicle companies try to use LiDAR. Tesla actually tries to use different methods, shall we say, these cameras. And, there are plenty of videos out there. Yes, the world is unpredictable. We can't fully calculate everything yet. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to, use like quantum computers and stuff and keep advancing. But I'm saying just because we can't calculate everything yet to its fullest extent, yes, incidents and statistics still do occur. So yes, you can point out, oh, this crash and that crash and this crash and these points of data that will be taken into account and improved upon. but you can point at those and say, therefore Tesla bad. And it's like, I don't know. Have you looked at, I think there's a survivorship bias or something, or a reverse survivorship bias. That's what I'm saying. If you're looking for the negative in something, you will find it. But if you look for the positive, you will also find it. So I'm saying measure both against each other. Does the positive outweigh the negative, or vice versa? That's how you become a critical thinker. And it paves the way for, I guess, what I keep talking about, critical understanding, critical remembering. Because I would say critical remembering is akin to how random access memory works, how a RAM stick might work on a computer. It stores, it compresses all this other stuff, but it makes, like, your brain makes memories foggy, like you don't remember them too well, and you may perhaps even forget sometimes. But memories aren't gone forever, because you can simply talk about an event with someone else. They can say, well, no, remember we also did this and this during this period of time. And if they say the right amount of words, the right key phrases, and they can uncompress this compressed information in your mind and bring out the memory into more clarity. I mean, personally, I would say everyone's experienced this, but I know I've definitely experienced it, where I just don't remember an event at all because it has just slipped my mind. And a friend or someone else comes up and says, oh, didn't you remember this, occurred X, Y, or Z? And then that suddenly opens, I guess, that gateway in my mind, if you will, that path to remembering that event. And this has triggered me, I'm sure as other people, to say things like, oh yeah, I remember, thereby demonstrating that memories aren't lost forever. Now, I was watching, when I was much younger, I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson, or I guess listening to the Star Talk podcast while I was, just playing World of Warcraft or something. And he remarked that when he was younger, he went into a library, or was in some place where there was a lot of books, basically any library, and he looked at all the shelves and looked at all the books. And then he realized that, well, if you think in a linear mindset and try to knock out every one of those books by reading them, you're not going to have enough time. You aren't. So you could think, oh, well, I'll never possibly be able to know it all. And then two, even if I somehow manage to know a great deal of it, I will forget a lot of it. Well, what I say to that is option 3. Condense the information contained in those books. Make a whole bookshelf into one book. Summarize it, paraphrase it. That's how I've been operating. I've been teaching my mindset to operate in the superposition of states, like a qubit. So basically, I can think like a quantum computer, so I don't miss the quantum leap. So AI doesn't leapfrog ahead of me, because I know AI is already starting to think like this. Anyways, that was just an anecdotal side story about my personal life, but Um, so Tesla, uh, half of Tesla's global deliveries came from China. That's what I'm saying. You can work together. If you have a lot of people to produce these products that people want, then that is a good thing. So, yes, has publicly praised China in the past. Yes, whenever someone does something good and commendable, then they do something good and commendable. Whenever they don't, then they don't. I'm saying just because, well, I know some people who would read such an article or such words and be like, oh, therefore this person is a forever this side supporter. So if someone was actually concerned about China, then in this scenario, they would be like, oh, Musk must be a China supporter. And it's like, well, it's an isolated incident. Uh, it's an isolated event. I'm saying if you go along this line of logic and you say, okay, China scores very high in all these isolated events, then it's a good entity, a good body. But if they only score high in some events and low in others, that's what I'm saying. Create like a rubric or like a code of conduct. I'm saying I believe the United States is good at that with their constitution. But you know, perhaps that could be a biased view. We could simply discuss or hash it out. You know, that type of thing. That's what I'm saying. We have to have like a grading rubric. Otherwise, there's just discourse for days with no progress. Anyways. Okay. FT said the billionaire appeared hesitant to comment on growing tensions between the US and China, but he said he believes there will be. Why? I don't think there will be conflict. I mean, as long as we can just simply talk about it. I think the biggest conflict that there might be would just be conflict of interest. So, you know, Taiwan just has this semiconductor transistor technological chip making prowess, microchip making prowess, for whatever reason. I already know how to do that. I just don't have the technology. But what I'm saying is, if that's what you were after, you could just learn about it. You know, we already had some, I think, Taiwanese, which you could actually just view as like an experimental province of China, if you will, as Hong Kong was, because you know for quite some time, it was there was not complete like Chinese mainland methodologies imposed upon that sector, if you will. So, personally, I think that it's not a failed experiment in Taiwan. I think there are some ideas there that led to their, you know, semiconductor prowess. But, you know, that's just the opinion of me. Perhaps it can be talked out further. I don't really understand. Like, I understand the concern that Elon Musk has, but personally, I think it could easily be figured out. What was I trying to say? I was saying something about these semiconductor microchip making facilities or factories that have already been contracted to be built in the United States. So I'm saying we're actually just kind of just doing, like, I guess the United States is getting some benefit out of Taiwan, and China could get some some conceptual, observational benefit out of the process in the history of Taiwan also. I don't think there's really a losing side here, but that's just my opinion.
They're saying